Let's talk. Your health and wellness podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our next podcast, or our podcast on your health and wellness. And as you know, we're exploring this over a couple of weeks, hopefully leading into months, about what we can do, obviously, to what can impact your health and wellness from both a longevity and a health perspective. And we've got a very exciting podcast lined up this evening with a very special guest. And we're going to be looking at the health benefits of kids training. This is really an unexplored topic, and we get lots of questions on this about parents and kids and teenagers. How should they be training? What should they be doing? And it's quite an important topic to unpack. And with me this evening on the podcast, we've got Brian Kitching, who is an expert in this field. So, Brian, welcome, and nice to have you on this podcast. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Avron. Okay, Brian Kitching. I've been in the fitness game since 1983. Got a company called Urison Body, which stands for General Sports Nutrition. I'm also one of the directors of an education institute who trains up youngsters to become personal trainers and instructors within the fitness industry itself. I started an organization in about 2000. It's called UBE, spelled UBE 360, and it's actually based on helping children. As most people know, I work with abused, abandoned, and at-risk children. And using sports as a vehicle or training as a vehicle, you actually help children, take them out of a situation that they do not think they have control of. And using that sports, that actually becomes a way of focusing and showing them that they can set their own goals and actually can achieve and become independent of a situation that they were brought up in, and actually create a success out of their lives. So yeah, that's basically just a short story.
I think that's amazing, and it's so great to have you on our show. And hopefully over the next period of time, we can unpack the various topics of and the details of the health benefits of kids training and the importance thereof. And we're really going to break it into a couple of categories this evening. Physical fitness and resistance training, social integration, and its impact and challenges and solutions, and we'll start going through it. But Brian, I think a really important part to really start with is in helping and unpacking it for our listeners in terms of, and we were talking a bit before we started the podcast, the different age groups, because I think one needs to realize there are different age groups in kids training, and we need to be sensitive to that as we unpack it, because there are going to be different issues and solutions to each of those age groups.
Well, the first age group, believe it or not, say again? The first age group, which many people do not regard as an age group for kids, would be during the term of pregnancy. And we found that mothers that during their first 2 trimesters, some of them as far as they've all 3 trimesters, actually can attend training in a studio situation. And believe it or not, the music and the interactions that parent actually has with that group of people actually get somehow installed into that child. We've had mothers that came into the gym while they were pregnant, went out into labor, came back with the little baby, and that little child at age 2 was with the mother in the studio doing step class, and within about 15-20 minutes fell asleep. But it just shows you that those children actually do grow accustomed to that. So you're actually building in something that is important to the parent, and that actually gets ingrained into that child itself. Then between the ages of 1 and 4 or 5, that's where we actually look at start training children. And we're not talking about physical activity as in a gym, but it's actually to get those children accustomed to doing certain movements, certain skill sets, hand-eye coordination, and that type of thing, which is all very important when it comes to developing a child further on if they're going to be specializing in sports. Then the one where we are predominantly, sorry?
No, great. Carry on, please.
Okay. The initiation stage or the prepubescent sport conditioning, that's the area where we would prefer children to start with their physical activities in a more formal environment, and that is between the ages of 6 and 10. And in that age group itself, once again, you start building up on the various small skill sets, and you learn to encourage and transfer skills to them through their small activities that they do. During that time as well, which is very, very nice for trainers, is that the developmental differences between boys and girls are basically non-existent. So co-educational training is great. You can have group training with boys and girls in a class ages 6 to 10. Fundamental in that training aspect is you do not push a child. You actually have to create a training environment which makes it interesting and fun for the child that wants to be there and wants to attend. Another important factor about bringing children in this young into the exercise and training situation is if a little child is slightly chubby and he starts joining the classes and he sees friends enjoying the classes, it actually makes them more inclined to want to be with them and actually starts combating and creating a new lifestyle mindset in them. So they actually start combating those negative effects of obesity and so on. So, and that is actually very, very critical in building that. And the later you start with something like that, the more difficult it is to start ingraining that type of lifestyle into a child. The sessions you're looking at approximately with the children in that age group of around 30 minutes, which is basically like skills-based type of training, and then building up from there into sports play. Now, it's important in this whole age group scenario that we're building on. The first focus that we're working on is something we call the anatomical adaptations of a child. And then afterwards, we start focusing on the physiological improvements. And normally the physiological improvements, it could start within 2 years after they've already started their initial training. And just to give you a quick breakdown, the anatomical adaptations is when you actually start building the foundation, digging the foundations, laying the base of the house, and start building the walls. The physiological improvements, that is when you start doing the layout of the house, the painting, and making the house look pretty. And you'll see that the younger the children are, up until about the ages of around 12, 13, they are more about enjoying and fun. And children after that, social media normally starts taking an impact, and they start following these fitness influencers. Okay.
Right. So there, what I really wanted to ask you there in terms of, I mean, what we're really talking about there is physical fitness and resistance training. That's what we're starting with, right?
Correct.
Can we talk a bit about, I mean, and that's a really important point, but I'd like to understand a bit more about cardiovascular health. And I'm going to come in and sort of bring in some medical and maybe we can talk a bit about that in terms of why, you know what I mean, in terms of kids developing at the different ages, the importance of obviously the cardiovascular health, what we call cardio, we know how adults are doing it. But what is your view, and have you seen that being an important part sort of in kids training?
Yes, it is important, but we don't focus on the cardiovascular as we would focus on it with adults and the older children. You're looking at something like building, once again, skills into it. That's running, catching, dribbling, kicking, small sprints, run between lines, cycling, swimming. So that's important to build that. And also a very important thing to teach a child while he's doing the resistance training and also the cardio is how to breathe. A lot of people under effort forget to breathe, and especially blondes. This is very true. So I normally tell my blonde ladies I'm going to give them a headphone and tell them breathe in and breathe out. Otherwise, they stop breathing.
Right. Okay, so it's not the traditional what we'd say in terms of cardio, but we are sort of teaching the kids, getting their cardiovascular system going, improving their function, teaching them how to breathe. And I presume that also would help combat sort of childhood obesity and associated conditions around that?
Not just the childhood obesity, it also teaching them how to breathe correctly, especially the deep breath in, small holes and breathe out. Also increases the nitrous oxide into the bloodstream. And as you know yourself, nitrous oxide extremely vital when it comes to the immune system and lung health, and also cellular health. So you actually start building in a pre-program for these youngsters to start building that longevity into their lifestyles.
Right. So, and I also want to ask you this, because a lot of parents are going to say, yeah, I mean, it sounds nice and it's great. Would you say, but maybe they'd argue, well, these kids get this in activities at school. Would you say that's enough, or they should be potentially attending specific classes for this type of exercise?
It's used to get adequate physical activities in school. Now the education system basically focuses on something called ALLO, where everything is theoretical, and then the children have to go home and do a project, and then they just copy that off the internet, with absolutely no physical activity. Once a week, they must probably go for a walk around the block or play a game on the field, but that is far from adequate. You're looking at least 3 times a week with at least 45 minutes to an hour per each session to really enhance any form of physical activity benefits.
Right. And for the kids who are playing like significant sports, being in the sports team, the soccer team, swimming, right, would you say that's sort of the kids who are very sporty and athletic? Would you say that's adequate?
In some ways, yes, and also no. Because if you look at statistics, and there's been many studies done in the past, if a child is being pushed into a organized sports team, the higher they achieve at school, in adult life they actually fall out. So most of the guys that play top tier rugby in the high schools, they will end up playing provincials. Guys that play second and thirds at high school, they end up becoming the Springboks of the national team players. So you actually wear a child out a lot faster. And then the nice thing about the gyms itself with resistance training, you're actually building a new skill set, because a lot of the sports nowadays, they do focusing on specialized training. And by focusing on specialized training, you're actually breaking the what I call bodybuilding training, which is not what you see on stage. That's the sport bodybuilding. Bodybuilding training is you're looking at building a balanced body. There are perfect ratios between what your hip measurement and your chest measurement is, what your bicep, neck, and calf are. That gives you a complete balance. And by building up those muscles as a whole in the human body and keeping that balance perfect throughout, the chances of injuries in contact sports are far less. And if you're looking at sports like rugby and soccer, those people would focus on things like bench press, squats, and deadlifts. Deadlifts and squats and all those things, do sort of strengthen the muscles, but what functionality you have, which muscle groups are they focusing? Most of them would be primarily focused on an area which would be your hamstrings, but then your quads would be underdeveloped, and you'll sit with problems with patella and or knees later on down the line, or hip injuries. Deadlifts at school preloads the back heavily for stress, and then you're sitting with issues with lower back issues. So building up a whole physique in a gym is far better than just going to do focused sports training. I think that they have to be combined.
Right. Brian, that sort of, and thanks for that. So that sort of, and that deals with the cardio, and we understanding that. That sort of brings me on to flexibility and mobility, right? So in my world, in the medical world, I would say that it's important to emphasize flexibility and mobility to help prevent injuries, good posture, supporting balance, muscular development. Kids are growing, and that's an important part to remember. They are in their growth phases. Would you agree with sort of the importance of flexibility, mobility, the importance around that, and what type of exercise would you be encouraging, obviously, in terms of that type of, to develop the flexibility and mobility?
With flexibility and mobility, it also depends on where you are at. We found that if you do too much stretch training, prior to a resistance training, the chances of injury are slightly bigger because you're sitting with far more lax joints. If you're doing something dynamic, if you're doing, let's go back to the chest press or the bench press. If you're doing push-ups prior to that, that is regarded as a warm-up. And you actually can build in flexibility into that by doing something like a touch release pull-up. And then if you're looking at the full flexibility after the training, if you're doing a full static stretching, great. If you're playing a sport, flexibility comes in through dynamic stretches. That will be like if you're going to be doing something like a sprint or rugby or soccer. It's by doing running high knees, breaking into a sprint, doing side steps, doing slalom courses and that type of thing. So that will build the flexibility in, but static stretches far better than the ballistic stretches and far better after training.
I'm going to save it. We'll talk about when we get to team sports and activities. I'm going to ask you to rank some sports, which will be quite interesting, and I'm going to throw out some interesting ones. I'd like to get your view on that.
Okay.
So we've spoken about cardio and flexibility, mobility. I want to, and I think this is quite important because I'm not sure there's a focus around this and maybe kids understand this, although I do see a lot more water bottles now than they say were 5 or 10 years ago. But the importance of nutrition and hydration. Let's just spend a time a bit unpacking that. And in your experience, how important is that in the physical fitness and the health and kids training, and a focus on that in terms of looking at the hydration and the nutrition? Can you give us a bit of understanding around that?
Very, very important. But it was also a very difficult one to navigate, especially in our industry, because we have to look at customs and traditions and religions. So basically, we're looking at a very balanced diet. I prefer something that is high in natural fibers and natural carbs. I do not believe in refined food. So if you're starting with your children young and teaching you how to eat those type of things, great. Water, very good. What we encourage parents to do is actually have a glass of water at the table, and have a glass of water prior to your meal, and then a glass of water either during or after the meal again, which just encourages the idea of hydration. And it also gets the numbers up on a daily basis for the hydration levels. Where people also go a lot wrong is nowadays you have these things, pre-workouts and energy drinks. And yes, we're giving the child a fluid, but it's very high in caffeine. It is very high in sugars, and those are things you don't want to give them. And as I said, we are trying to get children away from the very highly processed and high glycemic carbohydrates into the more natural type of thing. And also protein, a great source. We mentioned nitrous oxide earlier. Great one for that would be getting the children to eat beetroot. And we found with kids that do not want to eat beetroot, we calmed them in the group of children that we worked with. As I said, they come from abused, abandoned, or adverse conditions at home, and so they didn't have full nutrition. So what we used to do is the zucchinis and beetroots and carrot, we used to grate those very fine and then make zucchini, beetroot, carrot loaves for them. And they used to think this is a treat because it's a sweet, but it was all just health.
So I think the message is obviously keeping well hydrated, good nutrition, staying away from those high energy drinks, right? High caffeine drinks. We know it's popular amongst kids, but it's not so healthy. And in terms of to assist you through the day, and I think it's obviously teaching and mentoring kids, and obviously explaining that as they go through the training. I'd like to, so I think so that we're getting an understanding of the physical fitness, cardio, flexibility, nutrition, etc. I think what you've touched on, and I'd like to unpack it a bit more now, is sort of the social integration and its impact. How, understanding how important it is, obviously, for kids in terms of it's not just being for their physical bodies, but obviously how they're going to develop. And I think an important part of the social integration and impact is to understand team sports and group activities. Why is that important? And do you focus on that? And what skills does it give kids to obviously work to do those team sports?
To me, it's important because in the modern life that we're leading now, parents feel guilty and they give their children a tablet, a cell phone, or a video game, keep them busy, and they're not busy building a form of a communication with the outside world. If you see, most children are actually, the younger ones nowadays, are very awkward around people. And by bringing them into a gym environment or a class environment where they are interacting in a fun way, not as in a classroom in school where they are forced to focus the whole time, but they can really enjoy themselves. You actually see them start building up a relationship with other people. And they also feel more comfortable by seeing more people do it, that they've got something that they can work towards and achieve. And they don't feel so bad because they know they are working to get to a point in life. And that interaction with them, being able to communicate. And then what we also do is we work on a buddy system. So you team people up in the group training situation. And those people encourage each other. So if the one is not going to make it to the gym today, the other one will phone and say, I'm still going, I'm waiting for you. That person will, not always agree, but end up going. But when they walk out, they'll be laughing and enjoying it, and they would have actually loved the session. So you're building that where you are learning to bond with somebody and become dependent or reliant on somebody else to be a support system, which helps later on in life as well, because you know yourself, there's always going to be a support system you need to fall back on. And if you don't start building that up early, you wouldn't know how to do it when you're older.
Yeah. I mean, I would think it also teaches kids that, look, sport or training doesn't have to be individual, right? You can do it sort of in a team way, which is quite powerful, and you can do it as a social type of activity. And that in educating and training kids on that, I think is very powerful in terms of developing social skills, building confidence, reducing feelings of isolation, as you've said. One big area and one that I'm quite involved in and educating is mental health, right? And we know, I think the stress and anxiety of kids today is probably significantly greater than in previous years and generations, but I would think that assists in terms of the mental health. Have you seen that having a benefit in that realm?
Definitely. It's said, especially with the type of children that I work with, you do see mentally that they've really been battered badly. And what I found over the years, the people that know me, everybody knows me as the grumpy old man. I say a thing as I see it, and if you're not happy with what I said, that's going to be your issue to try and sort out. But I did tell you the truth. And all these kids, you think that they actually don't like that type of thing, but they actually found that I'm called the gym daddy. They all run to you with their problems that they have at home because there's nobody else that they can associate with at home. And you become a relief point, and also a point where your personal trainer, I don't know, you should still remember back in the old days with PT, the person that everybody feared the most but respected the most and always went to with issues was your PT teacher. And they are the ones that can actually help guide and actually help set the direction for you. And then also you'll trust that person more implicitly when they do refer you to somebody else to get better help. And we found that building up that type of network, the children actually mentally become stronger, and they learn to face situations. Most children would see a problem and they run away because it's a wall or a mountain to climb. But these children learn you don't climb the mountain, you find a way around the mountain or break through the mountain. And it builds up that independence, that self-reliance, and then also trusting the people that are around you that can actually help you in the situation.
I think that's very interesting, and I think I think it may be an area that's often not thought about. When you're kids and you're exercising children, but I think that's incredibly important. And and I think a very positive aspect that can be dealt with. And I think sort of mental health is an area that's neglected as kids develop today, and I think kids training and the benefits of training actually helps develop that. And one area that I've seen that children training and actively involved in sports and groups activities is sort of this resilience, and they've shown long term kids with resilience actually do better over the long term. And I think that's what this type of the benefits of this type of training can obviously create.
Yeah, definitely.
The community involvement as part of the social integration, its impact. So building community connections, getting involved, sense of belonging, and making a physical activity part of your life. What has your experience been on that in terms of building community?
I'm going to use one example. It's a very strange one. The sport of bodybuilding. That's where you build your muscles, stand on stage. You're all alone. Doesn't look like a team sport. You have a coach that supports you. You have your training partner that supports you. The parents get involved in helping that person. The friends get involved from schools. The families get involved, the extended families. All as a support mechanism and brings everybody together on the day of the competition, which is something that not many people will see because they see one person standing on stage alone. You'll see the same thing in most sports. And then when it regards to community is we do a lot of outreaches where we'll bring in, I call it paying back. When I got my education way back, Dr. Charles Hatfield always told me that in life, it's not about the money, it's about paying back what you receive. And we do groups where we do absolutely free of charge, high-level training with children, and these children end up excelling. And you'd be surprised, we've got children that have gone through my programs that we've developed for them over the years. They are doctors, they are lawyers, psychologists. One of the ladies is actually the UK. And those people, in turn, paid back again. When they come down, they actually come and join the groups, train with them as a group, talk about their experiences, where they were, where they're going, and it actually helps these children build a new identity for themselves. So as I said, many people are stuck in the situation where I'm born poor, I'm born in a ghetto, and that's just where I'll stay for the rest of my life. These people show that is where we started. That's not what we decided we wanted to be, and they can actually grow from there. And the payback system works great as a community involvement as well, where we have some of the youngsters that we train are playing rugby overseas. They come down, they visit, they go into local schools, they involve, they do these charity days with us, and it actually builds a new community. And then these little kids actually form individual groups in their areas, which we'll go and visit them during the holidays when I have a wee bit of downtime over Christmas. We'll actually get together, we'll do beach training. Then we have all the children from all areas coming through to the beach for 3-4 hours worth of training on the beach. We're doing sprints, we're doing sand dunes, we're doing ins and outs in the wave. And it's not just for a specific sport. It is children going out to enjoy physical activity and enjoying life away from all the issues that they have in their life. And then they actually go back into those communities, and every year our groups grow larger and larger. And they can't wait for that, and they talk about it every single year. And in the one previously disadvantaged area, there's actually a group that used to train with me on the beaches out in Bluewater Bay in Port Elizabeth every single year. One of the youngsters has actually developed through that training. He's actually started a sports club at one of the local parks, and they've grown from there. So yes, you do involve community, but start them young, and they actually start building those communities for you as well.
Amazing. And I'd like to use sort of the community involvement stepping onto now and talking about some challenges and solutions, right? Because we have parents out there, saying, okay, it sounds great. I think sort of I'm sold on the benefits of kids training, more formalized, getting my kids involved, etc., whatever age. how do you, and I'm sure you've gone through this quite a bit, and I think as parents, certainly myself as a parent, I've also, obviously experienced this and had to deal with this. But balancing academics and training, right? Because it's obviously a line you've got to assist with kids. I think it teaches them for the future in terms of balancing their work lives and sport lives. But sort of what strategies would you suggest or use for kids to balance the academic and training side? And I suppose that time management comes in there, and it's a very important skill.
Time management does come in there, but believe it or not, threat actually helps quite a lot. The one thing that I set up with the youngsters is, if you are not going to pass your test, I don't want to see you at trading. So you deny them something that they want. And we've got youngsters currently, I'll ask Anne if she can share photographs on the podcast later, that are in high school, that are training, and they are currently the top students in their schools. 80s and 90s across the board for their subjects, and they're doing absolutely brilliant. But the deal is, if you do not,
and that's quite an interesting point, right? I mean, and often you might think, well, the kids are just spending all the time doing sport; they're not doing well academics. But I think it would be the converse, that you often find that those kids who are doing a lot of exercise and they just know how to time management, they potentially do as well, if not better, because they're feeling fitter, they're feeling healthier.
But it's not just that.
Skills have to be a lot better, and often you find those kids excelling in all
yes,
spheres.
And it's not just that. You're also instilling that bit of discipline, because it takes discipline to come through and train. It takes discipline to know you're going to be suffering, but you're going to enjoy yourself and you're going to get the benefits. The same thing is with anything in life. You teach them that discipline through the one thing, which has become your focus point, and then you build that out to the rest of your life. And that is what's great about using sport as a vehicle to encourage children to become better at whatever they want to be in life.
It's an important skill that you take into your adult years as well. I mean, to be able to balance that work life. And often you find the people who are the busiest still manage to get in their exercise sessions and do well and excel. And you'd want to teach that as a kid as well, that one can do that and manage it from a time perspective. But
most definitely.
What sort of comes out to me there as well, just thinking about, is the benefits of a routine, right? And it starts teaching kids the importance of a routine. You've got study time, you've got sleep time, then sport time and relaxation time, and the importance of developing a routine. And I suppose doing that from a young age is very important, and a very healthy way to look at it.
Yeah, definitely. And also when you're talking about time, with your time management, you actually teach them that sleep is vital, because it's during your sleep patterns that your body's doing the repair work. It's during your sleep patterns that your deep sleep patterns that your body's releasing the growth hormone. So if you want to achieve anything physically, looking better, feeling stronger, you need to get that sleep in. And most of the kids across the board, by 9 o'clock, you can try and send them a WhatsApp message from my side to organize a training session for the next day, because I need to change something. Their phones will give you a little one tick, which means they've switched their data off and you know they're comfortably in bed and sleeping. So they do adhere to those principles that you do teach them, because they see the benefits of what's going to happen at the end of the day if they follow those or that advice that you're giving them.
But I'm glad you brought that point up about sleep, and through my shows I do place emphasis on that and the importance. I think it's probably one of the most undervalued sort of levers that can have an effect. And we speak a lot about it in adults, but I think kids as well, the importance of emphasizing you can't be having those late nights or sitting up looking at Netflix on your phone if you want to get the most productive way and be and be healthy and fit. And the importance about getting the right amount of sleep. And I think parents need to take that on and discuss that with their kids. So and it's, as you said, it's important for releasing all the different hormones and your mental state. And I think sometimes we see that kids really are lacking in sleep, and that actually affects their health. I suppose,
well, you're talking about the mental state. You know yourself, it's also during your sleep that your body actually starts reorganizing all those thoughts and all those feelings and all the experiences you had during the day. and builds those better connections. So if you're doing your studies and you're going to sleep and you're building those connections, you're going to sit with a smarter kid.
Yeah. Talking about inclusivity and adaptability, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, but I do want to ask you this. So we've got parents who are listening and say, okay, what? And I don't know if it's unfair to ask you to rate the different sports or activities or exercises. My kid's not doing much and I want to get them involved. How would I prioritize that as a parent in terms of saying, in rating the activities? Obviously, you've got to do what your kid likes as well, and that's an important part of the process. But sort of, if I can put in inverted commas, the best sort of activities to try and get your kids involved in, how would you rank them, assuming you could tailor it for your kids?
Foremost, whatever your kid finds fun, that's the direction you're going to go in, and don't try and live vicariously through your child because you want to become the basketball queen of South Africa or the master of South Africa. Force your children into those sports. A lot of the children we found, for example, girls and boys, parents are forcing them into a sport, and if you use soccer, for example, boys might prefer the rugby to the soccer, but they're doing the soccer just because dad wants them to, or mom wants them to. The girls will be not doing, they wouldn't be liking the soccer, but they're doing it once again because it's an activity available that the parents are making them do, but they would prefer something like hockey. So that is where trainers come in very nice and handy at gyms. When we do our body assessments, you get a feel of what is lacking on a person, and you start developing on specific areas. And while you're doing that development, the children actually find a knack in what they would like to do, and they'll come and talk to you about it. And then also, if you're looking at the younger ages of children, I wouldn't put them in, I know South Africa will shoot me for this, but rugby. You're looking at a very hard contact sport. The same thing happens in the US with the gridiron. Those children are in hard hitting situations, and if you're looking at growth plates being stunned, that's what will do it. Okay. So anything that's very high impact, the physical knock on the body, that is when you're sitting with the issue where those children will actually sit and have their growth plates affected. Whereas,
what we're trying to say there is that it really you got to fit the activity to your kid. Find out what your kids' likes and wants are. Do an assessment, and without having your preconceived ideas, suggest a sport or activity, a fitness class, a gym class, and really about two other aspects of parental involvement that I'd just like to talk about is one is creating a supportive environment for your kid. The importance of encouraging sports and activities, encouraging new activities, don't have preconceived ideas, and try and encourage an environment where your kids develop a love for being active, for doing exercise, for experiencing different types of sports activities, and the importance of going to the gym and the physical training, and the resistance training. The second point about parental involvement, just to mention that I think it's really important to talk about that it's important to set an example as a parent. In other words, not to say, well, your kids just need to go out and do exercise and benefits and training, but you as a parent are not doing it. And I think that goes for many things as a parent, but specifically with health and exercise, your kids need to see you doing exercise, the importance you place on going to the gym, of doing the resistance training, physical fitness, cardio, and sports. And I think then you can encourage them and have a family a setup in terms of sport activity and fitness. I see we've got Brian. Brian, I see you back with us. And just to, I was really just, whilst you were offline there, I was just talking about the importance of creating a supportive environment for your kids to do new activities and try new activities. And also set an example. But in the few minutes that we have left, Brian, you were busy talking about, and the point you cut out when you said people are going
so
to
on.
probably
And
shoot you for this, and you're about to
on
say
any of
something
the
about
high impact
rugby,
sports,
and
the
then you
chances
cut
of
off.
injuries
So I'm quite interested to hear
long-term
what
are
you
great,
what you're
especially
going
when
to
it
say
comes
on
to
that.
joints, shoulder joints, a big issue, knees, big issue. But also then even the girls with the netball, with that extended shoulder injuries, neck injuries right down the line. So if they're not getting the foundational training in, that becomes an issue. And also parents in the past all used to say that Olympic lifting or resistance training will stunt their children's growth. That is that's a fallacy. Things like high impact jumping off super high areas or impact sports like gridiron, rugby, and any of the very high impact sports, boxing and all those things, that can actually stunt the growth by putting that pressure on the growth plate at an earlier stage. And as protection, that will start locking up earlier. So that is important. And then the point that you mentioned about the inclusivity of families, we found that we encourage a father and a son to join together. They train as a group from a very young age. And then when the boys hit teenage, they separate and they join their friends and carry on training. The fathers carry on training on their own. And it's actually very nice to see how those two will still support each other throughout. And also little girls and moms. Girls will go to a little group classes with the children while mom is doing a normal class, and then doing a walk on a treadmill afterwards and stretches afterwards together. And then eventually the young girls will join their mothers in the classes and enjoy the aerobic activities in the classes or step classes or dance classes or whatever else. So that actually builds a bond which is becoming more and more scarce in modern society, which we are happy to see that is still going on in the gyms, definitely.
Right. Yeah. So I think that parental involvement is very important, and I think we've emphasised that. And I think we've covered some great points in terms of the benefits of kids training. What I maybe want to spend the last few minutes doing is just dispelling some myths, and I think in terms of take homes for those listening to this podcast, the one you mentioned was that resistance training at a young age is potentially will stunt kids' growth, and we've dispelled that myth and just say how important it actually is to facilitate and help with that growth.
Training will
Ron, are there any other big myths in your mind that you've seen, obviously being involved in this area sphere, that would be great to talk about here and just say, well, it's just not true when we're talking about the benefits of kids training?
Foods that will affect your hormone levels, high inflammatory type stuff that you're taking, and also once again through diet. So basically, it's everything that you do into yourself. It's not the sport itself. Yes, heavy training does put a lot of pressure on the body. So your immune system might seem impaired if you're going to come down with colds and flus, but if you're not eating properly to compensate for what you are using during your training and your repair, then surely something is going to give. So once again, it comes down to the eating. Those are the main myths that we do see. Otherwise, it's quite easy for most people.
I think the message, certainly from my side, is it's easy to do. We've got the facilities in our country. Encourage your kids. Take a supportive role. Get your kids involved, and don't be scared. And the benefits of which we've talked about in our podcast this evening, the huge benefits for your kids can't be understated. Brian, any final parting words from you? Take home messages for our listeners. Great. Thank you so much. It's really been such an educational podcast, Brian. And that's Brian Kitching, who's really involved in this area. And also just to say to our listeners, if you've got any questions around this, please send them through, or comments, or thoughts. And also please post any topics that you think would be relevant, that you think we could cover in our Let's Talk Health and Wellness series. But Brian, thanks a lot. And I hope over the last 45 minutes or so, we've really instilled the importance and the benefits of kids training, and parents will go out there and think, how do we do it? How do we get it going? And thanks for your time this evening.
Good night,
thanks so much. And thanks for all our listeners who've tuned in and are listening, and stay tuned. In the next while, we'll have our next podcast in our Let's Talk Health and Wellness series, and we'll be promoting the topic, and would love to get you involved. Give us your thoughts and comments, and Have a good evening, everyone.
Let's talk.